guys, welcome back to another evening in the Stormcave, where stories live and breathe and where family memories centered around sharing those stories together are cherished. I'm your host, Grant Walker, and I'm here with my co-host, Jenelle Schmidt, and we have a special guest with us today. Janelle, how you doing? Go ahead and introduce our guest for today.
I'm doing well, and I'm just so excited to have Evan Walker with us. He's here, he's folding his laundry, so we're just really happy that he's taking time out of his extremely busy schedule to hang out with us and have a conversation about stories. Hey, Evan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, I'm excited to be here, and folding laundry is my favorite thing to do. And right now, that is what I do for work. So, I'm a professional laundry folder today, and I am related to these two. That
Yes, yes, Evan is our brother, our much more successful brother. And
Listen, if you have gotten to the point,
clearly,
if you have got
I
to the point to
folding
where
laundry.
if you can get paid to fold laundry, you've arrived because I think it would make it much better. It's kind of like Pa Ingalls said, we work better when we're getting paid. And also, as another great man from history said, if you're good at something, never do it for free. So I think you have arrived.
I like that comparison. Yeah, I feel good about that one.
Yeah, a little Pa Ingalls, a little homicidal psychopath. I
yeah.
think you have both of those living inside you.
So Evan does a lot of graphic design and video work, and he has just launched a new business called Word Shirts. So if you're looking for something fun to do, you should look him up on Instagram at Word Shirts with two S's at the end, and he will make you laugh, and it will be worth it. I promise.
And he'll fill a certain needs you have because I don't know anybody who doesn't need a shirt.
Agreed.
That's true.
I need one.
They
Really
say,
makes sense.
Evan, they say what you're supposed to do to have a successful business is first you need to define a need.
Now,
No. What would you say
Evan,
as a CEO? That was my question for you. As a CEO, what do you think the first thing you need to do as a
oh well.
successful business?
First, you just have to have a great idea, and then you got to make it happen.
build a better mousetrap, and the world will beat a path to your door.
That's correct.
That's what my history teacher taught us in high school, and I have been trying to figure out how to do that ever since. Evan has done it.
Yeah, word shirts.
Agreed.
So
Check
we
them out.
yeah, for sure, definitely. Check him out, it's great. The shirts are fantastic and, a lot of fun, and they just make you happier. So, today for our conversation at Storm Cave, we wanted to talk about reading out loud to your kids and just kind of how that looks different in every family and how sometimes it can be a little hard to get started, I think, sometimes because everybody as I've talked to different people, as I've talked to different parents, I've found that everybody kinda has this picture in their head of what reading to their kids is going to look like, and sometimes it can get a little discouraging when it doesn't look that way, when it doesn't match up with what's in your head. So I kinda wanted to ask you guys, when you first had kids and, having grown up being read to and knowing that that was something you wanted to do, or maybe it wasn't something you wanted to do, but you had to anyway, um, what did you think it was gonna look like, and what does it actually look like in your house?
Yeah, I think that's great. And also think let's start because I just think this is also important is let's start at what we thought it would look like because
Yeah,
and also maybe let's define what we felt like it looked like for us growing up because each of us might have had a different experience with stories being read to us at night or stories being told to us at night, how we enjoyed that and how we went about that because I do think we all enjoyed it in different ways.
for
Um,
sure.
so Evan, go ahead and start us off.
You get to start.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So growing up, we always would have story time at night, and dad would read to us or mom would read to us. And I just remember we would gather around in one of our bedrooms, and we would all gather around dad. He'd have a book out, and we'd just like have a really nice, peaceful evening where we would be reading with him. He would read like probably 2 or 3 hours, And I very specifically remember sitting right next to him and like reading the words as he's reading them. And I really enjoyed that as a kid, which is really surprising given my attention span. Um, but so I remember that. And it was really just kind of, I just remember it being a peaceful, sometimes very funny time. Like he would add words in there to make sure we were listening. But I remember reading like Lord of the Rings and the Prydain Chronicles and Janelle, your books, and so many different stories. And it always seemed to me like we would finish Lord of the Rings in like a month,
Right.
right? Like that's how I remember it is
Yeah.
we started Lord of the Rings May 1st and we finished Lord of the Rings book 3 on May 31st. Are there
Yeah.
31 days in May? I don't know.
Yes, there are.
Hey, got it.
I got it in one.
Yeah. So that's how I remember it. I'm sure it's exact correct.
Yeah.
Uh,
How do you remember, reading time as kids, Grant?
Very, very similar to that. I remember it did feel like we got through a lot of books. I mean, I was just trying to think the other day of some of like the smaller either series. Like you guys remember the Cooper family adventures? I just remember the Tombs of Anak
Yes.
or even what was the series about like the magic bicycles?
Oh, yeah, the Spirit Flyer series.
yeah, forgot about
Yeah,
those.
totally forgot about those, but somehow we got through all that. Like I felt like we got through a lot of books because I feel like we read Lord of the Rings every other series too.
Right.
Like, I feel like
Yeah.
we read it at least twice because I remember there's a couple times. I also remember dad coming home, like bringing home a new book. Like I remember when, for some reason, when that Jungle Book anthology came home, or that had they had the Jungle Book and it had Ricky Tikki Tavi in the back, and
Mhm.
reading through some of those kinds of books. I remember, you know, either being gathered around dad or like later on, like just like being in our beds, and yeah, it was just a really relaxing time. I feel like there was times where we were doing stuff, whether it was, maybe building Legos or something, but for the most part, yeah, just it was just kind of sitting and listening. And so yeah, very similar, Evan, to how you remember that. That is how I remember it. And it does. It felt like, and I'll explain why that seems surprising to me, but it did seem like we got through a lot of books in short periods of time. But I don't know if that was
But
accurate.
with that said, like we still watched a lot of movies as a family too. Every Friday night we watched a movie.
Yep.
And so we did other things other than just reading.
Yeah. But I think
But somehow we got through a lot of books.
we did. We did.
It
Yeah.
was funny, Evan, that you mentioned dad adding words in because I called dad just the other day and I told him, there's things where I'll do this every once in a while where it's like I'll call mom or dad and be like, "Hey, mom, I've had an experience today where I feel like now I can finally empathize." And I just wanted to say I'm sorry. But I had an experience where I was reading to the kids and I was so tired.
Oh,
And I got done reading and I was like, "All right, guys, let's get our teeth brushed and get in bed." And it was just kind of quiet for a second. And they looked at me and they were like, Reese goes, "Dad, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" She said, "Because you weren't reading this story."
oh, no.
And apparently I had just kind of wandered off and then started telling some other story. And I was glad that they noticed, but they didn't. I feel like we were pretty good at like, being like, that can't possibly be in there. But they just kept listening and said, "Oh, well, I guess dad knows something about these words on." Anyways, so that was
Well,
fun.
I'd like to know which story you were reading.
I don't know. I couldn't get a straight answer. I don't think I don't know exactly what it was,
I
but
just
it left
remember
them in silence, whatever it was.
and I remember being very quiet on purpose just to see what he would say, because we knew that this wasn't the story, but it was gonna be funny, and yeah, yeah.
Yes, agreed.
But yeah, my remembrance is very similar to both of yours, like, just so many books, and some of it was we did watch a lot of movies, but movie night was very much condensed to just Friday night, and
Yeah.
I don't know about your families. Our families, we watch a lot more stuff, like, throughout the week, and we'll watch an episode. We watch more TV shows because we don't have to deal with commercials, which is great. And so we'll watch like an episode of something like with dinner or after dinner, and then have whatever else we're gonna do that evening, more throughout the week.
For
So
sure. We did have Saturday morning
mm,
cartoons,
yep,
and I know we watched Aladdin at least 1,200 times when
yeah,
that.
but that was like during the school day.
Yeah, yeah. So that doesn't count.
'Cause Evan
It's
was 2, so
educational.
Grant and I had to do school, and Evan's over in the corner watching Aladdin for the 4 billionth time, and
Building
Yes.
building a Lego universe,
yes.
which
But yeah, just I remember, yeah, Cooper Family Adventure, Spirit Flyer series, a lot of Goosebumps books, Lord of the Rings. Again, it did feel like we got through stuff really fast, and I'm just wondering if that's just childhood. Things just feel like they're going by fast, or you don't notice, like, the time in between, like, we don't remember the time when we were just bored. I don't know. But yeah, I
also,
think it helps that we did read pretty much every night. Like, it wasn't once a week or whatever. I feel like, we get through books a little bit slower here, but that's because, yeah, we are watching TV or we are watching movies or we are, you know, Derek's tired or I'm tired, and we're just like, "You know what? Let's just not read a book right now." So
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say you're right. It was very rare that we wouldn't read on any given night. And that's actually very impressive to me thinking back on it now, because now, just like you said, it's like any night, like, oh man, usually bedtime is 8:30 and it's 10 o'clock.
right.
And I don't know how we got here, but we're definitely not reading tonight.
Right. Right.
okay. So that being said, Evan, let's start with you. What was your expectation when you had kids in terms of getting them into reading stories? Were you excited about that? Did it feel daunting? Did it feel like, oh, I have to do this? And then when you started, sharing stories with your kids, how did the expectation match up with what it looks like for you guys now?
Yeah, so when we first had Reagan, I was really excited about reading to him, and I quickly realized I was picturing in my head Lord of the Rings, and he was picturing in his head 10 Little Butterflies. And so that first year or two was an adjustment because he
The
wasn't
first,
ready. He
the first,
wasn't ready for Harry Potter yet.
yeah, you're talking about the first year or two of his life.
Yeah.
What the heck? What the heck, Reagan?
Yeah. So that was a little disappointing. I had to adjust. But I was like, okay, we're gonna make it there. So, read Dr. Seuss those first few years. And then we started getting into Harry Potter, which I didn't read as a kid, but everybody else on planet Earth did. So I'm reading this for the first time. He gets really excited about it and he's all into it. And that was really solid for like a year where it matched up my expectations of he would be sitting right next to me. Dorothy would be running around the room because she was not interested yet. And um and that was really fun. And then after that first year, my kids now Dorothy is interested in listening to me read. Reagan also is interested in listening to me read, but not at all by itself. There has to be something else going on. And not like, oh, they're playing with Legos while I'm reading to them. No, they are reading other books while I am reading to them. So I'm reading book 132 of Harry Potter, and they are reading, Reagan's reading Keeper of the Lost Cities, which is 1 million pages long.
Yep.
And Dorothy is reading some comic book over here, Calvin and Hobbes, and they will change books in the middle of when I'm reading to them, but they're also paying attention. So I'll stop and be like, "Are you guys know what I'm reading? Like, am I just reading myself?" And they'll tell me exactly what I'm reading about. So I'm very impressed that they can multitask like that because I can read one book per decade.
Yeah.
The only other thing that is very different about my kids' story time routine at night and my own when I was growing up is, like I said, it felt like we would read Lord of the Rings every month. Like so many books, so fast. I've been reading Harry Potter for the past 10 years. Like, we get through one page,
Yeah.
and I'm like, story time is over for the night. It just feels a lot slower. I feel like
Yeah.
our pace is slower. Reagan and I have gotten through, I think, book 6 of Harry Potter, I think.
Nice.
And Dorothy is now much more interested in it, so we're going back and reading them again. But Reagan's going to be in college before it's done.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, like, even thinking about Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, and this probably happened younger for you guys. Dad read us The Hobbit, like, 12 times before we ever read Lord of the Rings. I didn't even know Lord of the Rings existed until I do have a very specific memory of going to Borders, and he found the Lord of the Rings, and he was like, "Oh, we're gonna read this one next." And I was like, "What is it?" And he was like, "Oh, it's the sequel to The Hobbit." I was like, "The Hobbit has a sequel? That's crazy." And I was probably maybe 12 at the time. I mean, it was later. And then I do feel like he read it more than once to us, but it was like he waited for a while. And again, you guys were younger. And Brittany was 2 at that point. So he definitely had to read it again for her. But yeah, like we read The Hobbit a bunch. We read the Chronicles of Narnia, we read the Chronicles of Brynaid. When you think about those books though, what's very interesting is they are not Harry Potter sized books.
No, they're huge.
The books that we read, that dad read the most to us were like, you think about, okay, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh yeah, that's
How
true.
many words do you think is in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
That's pretty short. Yeah, you're right.
It's 37,000 words. Do you know how many words are in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix?
11 billion.
237,000 words.
Holy smokes.
It's the
Wow.
longest book in the series.
Wow.
They're all over 150. They are not short books. And, actually, the first book might be closer to 80, but it's still, like, they are not short books compared to the books that we read, like the Cooper Family Adventures, the Chronicles of Prydain, the Chronicles of Narnia, the Goosebumps books. Those are all 60,000 words or less. You can get through them a lot faster. So, you can give yourself a little bit of credit. You're tackling much larger books.
Well, so I have a question for you, Janelle, because I think you could relate to this more than I could. Because, like I said, I didn't read very much as a kid. I did not like reading. I have always felt like I read slow, and it's not that I feel that I read slow; it's that I do read slow. But my question for you is: so I was never in danger as a child of reading faster than the stories were being read to me. Whereas Reagan is constantly like he wants to read the next Harry Potter book, but I'm not ready to read it to him yet. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to read that without me. And there are so many books that it's like he's going to experience that story without me.
Mhm.
And I have to be okay with it because he's reading so much faster. So otherwise, he'll just have nothing to read.
Yeah. Right. What was the question?
Oh, the question is how so you read a lot as a
Yep.
kid, and um, so I'm sure I remember there were times where you would recommend a story
Mhm.
that none of us had ever read before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think, and again, like, because my kids are voracious readers as well. Um, I think you just have to kinda pick and go, "These are the stories that really matter to me as a parent that I want to experience with you for the first time." And everything else is fair game. 'Cause otherwise you really aren't. You're not. I mean, I read fast, and I homeschool our kids, and so we read a lot for school. So we actually I think that's part of the reason we don't read as much at night is because I am just constantly reading to them all day, every day throughout the school year because our curriculum is very living books based, and so we read a lot of novels. We read a lot of fun books that also, go along with our curriculum. And so, like, with that, we've read The Chronicles of Narnia, we've read, um no, just tons of books. Banner in the Sky was a school book. And so there's just, like, because we're reading so many books during the day, it's, okay, there's these books, and then I generally will have, like, 1 fun book that has nothing to do with our curriculum. I just want to read it to the kids. And it's like, this one I want to read to you. And then everything else is more just I can recommend it and go, "Ooh," I love giving books to Leona and Natalie and being like, "You gotta read this," or giving books to Brant now that he's getting more into reading on his own and being like, "Oh, I think you're really gonna like this," and then, like, asking them or, "Hey, what do you think of it?" or whatever, and then we can talk about it because I've read it and they've read it. One of another vivid memory, from our childhood with dad reading to us was when he was reading A Wrinkle in Time, and I was under the age of 10 because I was still upstairs in the upstairs bedroom, and he was reading A Wrinkle in Time, and I couldn't wait. I had to know what was going to happen in this story, and so he was at work, and I went into mom and dad's bedroom, and I got that book off of the nightstand, and I took it to my room, and I just read the whole rest of it. I spent the whole day just reading that book, that was all I did, and when dad got home, I told him, and he was very hurt, and I didn't mean to hurt his feelings, but he was just, I could tell that that was something that bothered him, and I think in that moment, he was like, "Oh, no, it's the end of an era. Janelle's not gonna want me to read out loud to her anymore." And I was like, "No, no, I want you to read out loud to me. I still want you to read this book out loud to me. I had to know how it ended." And he did. He continued reading the book out loud, and it was great. But yeah, so I do remember doing that, but I think that was the only one that I ever did that, where I read ahead to find out. Otherwise, if I'd already read it and it was, like, my recommendation because he was reading it, he was, looking for something to read to everybody. But but yeah,
Well,
it's
that brings up a good point too, because so what's different about when I my childhood being read to story time and my kids, like if I finish a book, for me, that book is over. It is very rare that I'll go back and read a book again.
Mhm.
Sometimes I will, but very rare. And so for me, it's like I know the story is over. Now I have to move on. And
Yeah.
so if my kids get ahead of me and read before me, then it's like, oh, now I don't get to read it to you. But I've quickly learned that Reagan has read up to book 6 of Harry Potter. He's read all of those books probably 6 times each. Like, he goes back and he reads the same story over and over and over, and he loves it, and he
Mhm.
loves picking up on new things, and it's just very different from myself because it's like, again, once I finish a book, that book is no more,
It's like it no longer exists.
which is probably really fun for an author to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Thanks for the book. It is done.
See if I dedicate any more to you.
No need for second editions. One
We'll
is
never read that again.
well, you know what? That is, and I think it's kind of it just parenting in a little bit of a nutshell. Because I was thinking about this starting to read with my kids, and Evan, kind of similar to you, wanting to jump into, and one of the things I wonder about, growing up for us, feeling like we read a lot of stories. We didn't know what was coming next. We didn't know that there was all of these books out there to be read. And so it was just like, oh wow, that was a cool one. Oh wow, that was another cool book. And as a parent, even outside of books, there's so many things you want to share with your kids. And so hopefully it makes you feel a little better, Evan. I feel like we've been in Harry Potter forever, and I love the Harry Potter series. But there's a lot of times where it's like, man, like we got to get this done, otherwise we won't be able to read any other books. And there's other books, like there's movies, we've talked about it a little bit where it's like, man, there's movies I want to share with my kids, but trying to determine when is right, when is wrong. I was talking with Evan recently about wanting to share the movie Jaws with my kids, and we got 2 minutes into Jaws and had to turn it off because my kids were almost in tears with how scared they were, and nothing had happened yet. Nothing had happened. You had the POV of a fish swimming through the water, and they were terrified. And I realized, even though this movie's rated PG, they're not ready for this yet. But
No.
also, when we first started reading, I was hoping that it would just immediately be what it was that I remembered growing up reading being. And I have probably totally forgotten the first, I don't remember reading Wrinkle in Time, and I would have been old enough to remember that, but I don't remember ever reading that book. So
You would've been like 4 or 5.
Well,
3 or 4?
if you
If
were
I w
8, yeah, okay. For some reason, I was thinking that I would anyways, all that to say, it took a while before I think I probably got into any real stories, and so same
yeah.
thing, when my kids were born, it's like, just I can't wait to read them this, but this is where they are right now, and what has been fun is there have been times where Reese and Wyatt have always really loved reading, and Luca, I think, is still on the fence. He's the first one where, if I say, "Okay, that's it," Reese and Wyatt will be like, "Oh, Dad, come on, please read more." Luca will be like, "Nope, that's it, we're done. Go to bed. No more reading, Dad." They're like, "Come on, Dad, don't read more, please." And so for a while, it was like, "Oh, man, I don't know if Luca's gonna get into it," and I've told that story many times about how we'd almost gotten through we were on the last book, book 4 of the Chronicles of Prydain, and I said something, and Luca goes, "Who said that, Dad?" I said, "Oh, Taran said that," and he goes, Who's Taran?" uh, the main character of the series we've been reading for 6 months, and so feeling like, oh, like he just doesn't like reading, and but I've seen that same thing in other things too. It's like, oh, we started playing t-ball and the boys aren't into it, and so I should just like give up on t-ball or anything, and seeing how they slowly either find new things that they like, and it just kind of takes your family into something new that's like this is different from my experience, but this is awesome, and we found something that we like. And I think, and you guys can talk about that a little bit too, because I think, Evan with lacrosse or Janelle with cross country, you start finding things that's like, oh wow, this is totally new to me, but this is awesome, and my kids love it. And so that's been really fun to kind of get into, stories where it was really fun. I think it was the Wing Feather Saga channel. That was the first series. We had read a couple. We'd read maybe one or two of the books of the Chronicles of Narnia, and we had read a couple other books that I would say, oh, we're a little bit more serious. And we'd read the entire Chronicles of Prydain, but it wasn't until the Wing Feather Saga where I felt like, oh, my kids are loving this and they're understanding the story and they're wanting more, whether they're saying it or how they're saying it might be different, but it was like, okay, that took a while to get there, and I felt like we had to kind of build into that. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, they want to read every single night, because they
Yep.
didn't know that was a thing. And so it has been interesting to kind of allow that to happen, because I'm very much like, oh, it's got to be this way.
Yeah. Well, and your kids are different. They're gonna be a little different than you. Like,
For sure.
you share the things you love with them. They will eventually gravitate towards those things because that's just how psychology works. Like, the things that are familiar, by and large, tend to be the things that we care about later in life too. And, especially if they're good, if they're good memories wrapped around them. But, like, yeah, I same as you guys, I remember, like, I had this vision in my head where I would just sit on the couch. I was gonna sit on the couch and I was going to read stories, and for the first couple years of their lives, like, this vision played out. I would sit down with a picture book, and they would snuggle up next to me, and I would read it to them, and I'd point out the words, and they'd get a kick out of the story, and they'd look at the pictures, and they'd ask questions, and they'd be very invested. Fast forward a few years, and now we're reading chapter books that have no pictures, so nobody wants to sit next to me anymore, and And they like, we're reading book for school, and it's like a fun book. It's like, okay, it's like Henry Huggins, okay? It's not like some cerebral whatever. And I'm reading the book, and I've like, okay, you don't have to sit next to me, but you have to sit still, and they're all sitting around the room. And I started asking questions because I was like, I don't feel like I'm getting any reaction here. And not one of my children could tell me anything about the last 5 or 6 pages I'd read. They couldn't answer any questions about this story. And that was when I discovered that my children all need to do things while we read. Leanna will crochet. I'll get out so I was started printing out coloring pictures, and they look like they're completely disconnected. They are very much focused on whatever handcrafty thing they're doing. Building Legos is okay. And and then I would ask questions. So then the next day I was like, okay, we're going to color pictures and crochet and whatever you want to do. You just can't talk, and they can't like play games. I've discovered that the chess is where I draw the line. You can't play chess and listen to the story at the same time. But all of a sudden they could answer all the questions. They were listening and they were hearing the story and they were very interested in the story, but it didn't look anything like what I had in my head of how it was supposed to look. So I think that's also one that's like, it's good to kind of let go of that a little bit and go, okay, this is different. And they are going to find, they're gonna have the stories that they love. And I don't know if it's because they just like those stories more, or if they're in a better mood when we're reading a specific story, like sometimes it's just circumstances, sometimes it's no, that story caught their attention, but yeah, it's fun to see how different they are and just the different things they gravitate towards. So,
It's
but yeah.
fun for me to see how how they change too so rapidly because I think of like Dorothy and her reading journey. A year ago, she had no interest in reading with me, no interest in reading on her own, and I was like, okay, well, like you, Grant, maybe she just doesn't like reading, and that's not going to be her thing. And fast forward to now, and she's the one constantly asking if I will read to her, and she's constantly got a book in her hand, and it's fun to watch because we're now at the point where there are no more pictures in the books, and she'll be sitting next to me rarely. And I think I'm just reading to her, and we're having a good time, and I'll stop and she'll be like, "Wait, where are you?" And it's like, "Oh, you're following along." And it just kind of blew my mind because I'm like, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that that's what you were doing, but it's
Ah,
fun.
that's awesome. I think as a parent, one of my favorite things in the world is watching is finding that book. Like, I don't know if you've had this in with your kids, but with every one of my kids, there's been like the book that launched them into wanting to read themselves. And I don't know, like with Leanna, it was the Nancy Clancy. So, like, there's the Fancy Nancy picture books. Well, then there's like the Nancy Clancy detective chapter books with lots of pictures, but they're more black and white. With Natalie and Brant, it was Magic Tree House. And with Graydon, so far it's Calvin and Hobbes. But they love reading and it's great. So, and Foxtrot. Graydon also loves Foxtrot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is really cool to see them do that. What if, like, I've thought about this a little bit because it takes effort to read or tell stories. And it would be so much easier to just say, go to bed, children. What what are your guys' reason for even because it can be defeating if like anything, if my kids aren't into something right away. I told Angelina this recently, like with coaching baseball. I just would love it to get to the point to where it was fun. Because if it's not fun, like, let's do something else. But I've also seen with Reese, she did dance for a number of years where it was just an activity and never would do anything outside of, like, her dance class or a dance recital. But just this year, seeing her, come home and practicing her dance and, kind of realizing, "Oh, I can be kinda good at this," and, like, starting to put a little bit more into it and starting to see, "Oh, wow, she is doing this on her own." Kinda like you said, like, you see them, they love it enough to go and read on their own, and that's a really cool thing. What is the reason that we as parents want to take the time that we have with our kids and spend some of that time reading? Why is that important to us? Janelle, you can start. Like,
Okay.
what is your reason for even wanting to try to build a love for storytelling, like as a family, and not just well, if they like reading, they can read on their own.
I think some of it is just, I love stories so much, and I grew up on stories, and I feel like I mean, you can look up the benefits of reading to your kids, you can look up the benefits of reading stories, but I like and there's so many, so it's I'm having a hard time picking, but it's like just a love of language, um, a larger vocabulary, uh, the empathy that you learn from reading about characters who are like you, who aren't like you, right? You get this feeling that you can get to know people. Maybe some people just live in areas where everybody around them is like them. So you read a story, you watch a movie, you see people who aren't like you, and you gain empathy for them. But you also can meet people in stories that are like you, and you feel seen. You feel like I'm not alone, right? Because I think a lot of times kids can get this idea in their heads because kids are very egocentric, not in a bad way, but just in a they think everybody's looking at them, especially when they get to, like, middle school, which, Grant, you're getting there, Evan, it's coming.
I've
It's not a
almost
bad
made it
thing.
to middle school. I don't know if I'm gonna pass
It's it's
third
not a
grade.
bad thing. No, I mean, you're kids, obviously, not you. Thanks. Uh if there's a way that I said this and it could be taken wrong, I meant it the other way. Um,
I didn't graduate the 3rd grade for nothing.
exactly, but, like, with your kids, like, you're getting there, you're getting there, and middle school is great. I love middle schoolers, they're so fun. But they really, truly, honestly believe that everybody in the world is staring at them and judging them and finding all their faults, and, you just kinda have to kinda laugh a little bit and be like, "Okay, are you doing that to your friends? Like, are you staring at them and judging them and finding all their faults?" And they're like, "Well, no, of course not." You're like, "Yeah, they aren't doing it either. They are so wrapped up in themselves and that everybody is looking at them. They don't have time to look at anybody else. You're fine." And sometimes that helps. With someone like, Natalie is more analytical. Like, you can point that out to her, and she's like, "Oh, good point," and then she moves on with her life. Um Not every middle schooler is like that, but it it's I feel like they get a better understanding of interpersonal communication, of understanding other people and seeing things from other people's perspectives when they read, and then also just the relationships that you build through sharing stories, through reading the same stories, and talking about them and discussing them. I mean, that's yeah, I didn't know this when growing up, but I have come to discover that the way that our family approached stories is very odd, that we talk about them and we discuss them and we quote them and we continue to think about them and we analyze them and, like, I do that with my kids because that's just what I do. I can't imagine watching a movie or reading a book and then just, "Oh, okay. I didn't think anything about that and I didn't get anything out of it." And, I talk to friends and they're like, "Oh, I just walk away." It's like, "Really? You know, it didn't affect you? Okay." It's fine. But but I want my kids to think on that level, and so I think it's important, and that's why I read to them.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. What about you, Evan? If you had to say, if you had to give a reason for why you think it's important, or if you think it's important, why take the effort to try to read as a family?
Well, I would love to say that I had some deeper meaning and I was very analytical about wanting to read to my kids. But I cannot say that. I mainly started reading to them because that's what we did. And so I was like, well, this is just what you do. You read to your kids at bedtime. I honestly didn't even think anything more than that. Like, this is something you do and I enjoy it. So here we go. Now, from there, I've definitely come to understand the benefits, and there's obviously the scientific reasons, and your kids are going to do better, and they're going to thrive if they're more prone to reading. But when we first started, it was just, yeah, this is what you do, and I didn't think any more of it than that. Yeah, you can definitely see that the stories, loving the stories and getting to know characters, and like you said, learning about situations that either you've never seen before, or, "Oh, wow, this is very similar to what I'm going through." And I've seen that with Reagan, especially early on when he started reading, like Percy Jackson. He would start recognizing things that Percy Jackson was seeing, and he'd be like, "Oh, this applies to me," or, and so that's been fun to see, like, them recognizing different things and characters that can help them in their own life, or, just help their imagination in different ways, so
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. Do you guys this is so like for me, and again, I agree with you, Evan. I think when I started, it was just like, yeah, we liked doing it. So this is what you do because I want it to be like, I want them to have, similar childhood to a mine because I loved my childhood. But as I was going along, starting to see things that I don't know if it was ever the intent or the purpose for us or even now, but like think about our family and Janelle down to Brittany, quite a good gap in age, and all of us a little bit different, right? And so then I think of my kids, their gaps in age, and I don't know, Janelle, your kids, their gap in age, and Evan, the gap between Reagan and Dorothy. But we had this shared experience. And once we got to the point to where, the books we were reading could be entertaining to us all the way down to Brittany and the books that we read that Brittany would read later, it gave us this shared bond when so much of our life was different. You were in high school while we were in middle school and junior high. And so your friend group and a lot of your life was just at a different level than us. And then you're in college and we're in high school. And so it would be very easy for our lives to be totally separate. And there were other things that we enjoyed doing as a family, but it was something that was a common bond, like something that we shared. And one of my favorite things that's happened recently is my kids have started to one pick up on, a humorous quote or quotes in a book, but they've started using them. And I don't want to be judged because I allowed my kids to watch Independence Day, but one of my favorite things ever is now the fact that whenever we're saying goodbye to anybody, they'll all be like, say, "Hey, bye, grandma." And Luca will just go, "Goodbye." Like Jeff Goldblum, friend Will Smith says, "Peace" in Independence Day, and they'll all like giggle amongst each other, and then they'll all be like, "Goodbye," and nobody knows what they're talking about, but they do, and it's something that they're sharing together. And of
Yep.
course, I love the idea of pouring courage and integrity and honor and truth and friendship. It's one. Why do we love Harry Potter? The magic is cool and the world is really fun, but what I love is the characters and the friendship between Ron, Hermione, and Harry. And like I want to pour those kind of ideas into my kids. So of course it's the stories I love to read are the ones where it's like, oh, this says what I want to say better than I could say it. And maybe they'll hear it, or kind of like if a different coach says something, you might pick up on it. And then there's times where I think, oh, maybe if somebody else was coaching my boys in baseball, they'd have more fun or they would get it because they might just understand it differently. And so I love those parts of stories. But one of the things I really love is the fact that it's taking my kids whose ages span, almost 10 years, and it's giving all of them this shared experience and it's building a friendship there that I'm sure could be built in other ways, but it's just a really cool way to see them you know, quoting stories together and getting excited about stories together and watching movies together. It's kind of like that movie theater experience where you go in with a bunch of strangers and you leave and you don't ever know anything about each other, but you all could have that experience of, oh, did you see Spider-Man in movie theaters? Wasn't that amazing when we first saw that? Or do you remember seeing Gladiator for the first time in a movie theater? And you might have nothing else in common, but you could have that experience and you might have different thoughts and opinions. And that's why it's fun to talk about. But it's just a cool way for families to have something that they all share together. And so like I said, I don't think I went into it with that idea, but it's kind of been fun almost uh, being able to zoom out and see that a little bit. And it's not always perfect. And there's plenty of times where story time lasts half a page
Right.
because I'm either exhausted or nobody's interested
Yeah.
and it doesn't always look the same. And like you said, Evan, there's so many nights where I'll be like, "Man, should we read stories?" And she'll be like, "It's 9:30 or it's 10 o'clock." No, it is not story time. It is not story time. But
Thought
it
about
is
this earlier.
the other part of it is a little bit selfish where it's like it has become one of the things that I do look forward to. And I do feel like, man, if we don't get to story time, the kids might not be bummed, but I'm kind of bummed because it's a fun thing to do to hang out with them. And at my age, Luca wants to play tackle football. And at 8:30 at night, lying down and reading is just a little bit more enjoyable for me than playing tackle football at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Now, if family time started at 9 o'clock in the morning, maybe tackle football would be what we do as a family.
Uh, Absolutely. I wonder if dad read to us so that he could give his ribs a break from Evan, like, just ramming into him.
Maybe that's
Secrets
well,
too secret to tell. Oh, we
all
yeah.
it all originated from how can I have fun with my kids without getting injured?
Yeah, exactly.
well, you think about it, he
Uh,
spent all day doing handstands on rafters
Right.
and working a hammer, so it's shocking that he would want to come home and sit down and do some reading.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Like, where
Again,
did he get the energy? I just think about, like, our dance parties around the like, where we'd be washing dishes, and then we'd all get in, like, a train, and we'd be dancing to Care Bear Family around the living room, and he's, like, jumping up on couches, and we're all trying to keep up, and I don't know, like, how? How?
Yeah, I have often wondered.
it's funny because now, but I don't think it ever even occurred to me to wonder what mom or dad did when we weren't around. The only thing that mattered was when we were with them, what they were doing. And so I don't know what dad did for work. Yeah, he did handstands all day on rafters because we drove by a job site one time and saw him do that. And I just thought, yeah, I guess people pay him to do that.
A great
That's
job.
funny.
Yeah. And I told Angelina this the other day because, Angelina has been cooking breakfast for the kids while I make lunches. And constantly, when the kids come home, they give me a report card on how I did making them lunches.
Oh,
And Angelina had made like a three-course breakfast meal. And she said, okay, breakfast is ready. And Wyatt's like, oh, what is it? And she said, oh, it's eggs and bacon and avocado toast and pancakes and hash browns and toast buttered in the kitchen. And Wyatt goes, oh, man. And I said, Wyatt, your mom. I was like, you know what? I feel so bad because I don't think I ever made a lunch for myself ever until I got to college, ever. And I was like, I want to call mom up and be like, Mom, you you taught us in homeschool. You put up with all our shenanigans, and I don't know, like, I don't know if she was able to rest or relax. She probably had to clean the house whenever we were out of the house for like 4 hours on our expeditions across the railroad tracks.
yep.
But I am sorry that I just took that for granted.
Yes.
That my apple slices,
We're not quite thin enough.
yeah. So I don't know. It's a different perspective. I was thinking that as we went camping this weekend, I was thinking, vacations used to be just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now they're just a lot of work
Yeah.
to get to that fun.
It gets there.
It
It
does.
gets there.
It does.
We've only ever camped in our own backyard, so I don't know about camping, but vacations get more and more fun as your youngest is able to carry him or herself on their own 2 legs for the entire time. That's
Indeed.
when it gets fun.
Indeed.
Oh. It's funny as, like, I was listening to you guys answer that last question. I was like, well, if you're going back to the very first, like, why did I ever start reading to my kids? Because I like reading. That's the answer. I just do. And I had stories I wanted to share with them. But, as you get as you spend 16 years doing it and then, write for a living and you see all these memes and you see all this scientific stuff and you're like, "Oh yeah, my kids are getting that too. That's great." But really, I just wanted to read The Princess and the Goblin to my daughter when she was
Yes.
4. It's a little bit advanced, but she still remembers it, so it works.
Well, it is fun when because it's fun to see them find their own things that they love, but it's kinda like with baseball. I've
Mhm.
If my boys don't enjoy baseball, that's fine. That's fine. But it would be fun if they did just because I feel like I would have something to offer. Luke is really into basketball, and it's so fun to watch how excited he is about it.
Mhm.
There's just not much I can help him with there, whether it be coaching or genetically. But
Well, and that's where
it's
you
fun to
start
follow
doing a
that
lot of
journey.
research as a
Oh, yeah,
parent, because
absolutely.
it's funny, I thought to that was the thing. I was like, when we had boys, I was like, "We are going to spend all of our summers playing baseball. That's just what we're gonna do. I'm so excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to little league again." And neither one of my boys has any interest in playing baseball, except for very occasionally in the backyard for about 12 seconds. But my daughters loves running, which is so weird to me. I don't love running. It's not my favorite thing. I like running if I have to like, catch a frisbee or go after a soccer ball, but like cross country is her thing and it has become my thing too because I want to be able to talk to her about it. I want to be able to help her with it. She wants to be faster and so it has become like I helped coach track this year. I know nothing about long jump, but I learned about long jump so I could help coach this team so this team could exist for my daughters. And Natalie is all into horseback riding, and I was into horseback riding as a kid, but haven't done it in years. And I've signed up to take vaulting lessons with her in this summer, which is going to be super fun and a little terrifying. But, you know, standing on a horse, that sounds great. Let's do it. So it's funny how, like, Evan was talking to me the other day about his kids getting into lacrosse. And it's just, yeah, you kind of, it's fun to get into the things that your kids get passionate about, even if it's not the same exact thing that you were passionate about as a kid. So. We have veered off course a little bit.
We have,
That's all right.
and Evan has finished
And
folding
Evan has
laundry, so I
finished his
feel like
laundry.
our time is up. But
Evan's gotta go make a word shirt video and
That's right. That's right. I gotta tend to some serious business.
Yes.
Evan, just before we go, because what we like to do is like we've had some authors on and we're gonna have some more guests on, and we want to give them an opportunity to, share their work with the world. So go ahead and give us the word shirt word of the day, your little plug for this booming business that's really taking off. If you want to be a part of the next big thing, for those of us who have been around long enough to feel like, man, we missed out. We should have invested in Microsoft or Apple or Tesla, but we didn't do it. There are new opportunities, and this is yours today with word shirts. So maybe give us the word of the day and sign us off here.
Yeah, well, I mean, the good news is there's still time. Jump on board. The train is it's left the station, but you can still get on.
So it's
Uh,
not like
Word of the
yeah,
day.
do you have to run to get on, or is it like a brisk walk, or is it like it's left the station but it's still
Yeah.
sitting like close to the station?
No, no, giddy up, run.
Hustle, hustle. You have time, but hustle.
So I would say the word of the day is faucet.
Nice. I thought you were gonna say something very different.
No, no, you thought wrong.
Faucet, faucet.
Faucet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
just
I was gonna
imagine
go,
imagine that on a shirt.
I like it.
Faucet.
Faucet.
Yeah, yeah. I think it has opportunities for
Great, but
growth.
great potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we had talked about this, because one of the great things, and the reason that this correlates, one of the reasons we had you on the show, Evan, is because your business, it might seem on the surface like, oh, what does this have to do with reading with your kids? But your business is not only, filling one need only, because let's say somebody out there can't read and they see you walking down the street with faucet across your chest. They're going to probably go home and find Rosetta Stone for reading and learn how to read because they're going to want to know what that was that it said. So you're shirting people, but you're also you're also providing an impetus. And if nothing else, if you are the reason that a child learns to read, like Metro Man said, read words, kids. What else is there?
Well, people often ask, you find yourself in new situations, right? Like you go to a party, go to a gathering of other humans. It's
I
usually where I
don't.
find myself. Usually where I find myself the least comfortable. Um, but you show up to these gatherings of other fellow human beings, and they all want to know, what do you do? What do you do? And Grant, you just gave me a great new explanation. So I spend most of my day shirting people.
Just most of it.
Yeah, my 9 to 5, regular working hours.
And
It's,
inspiring an interest in reading.
that's right. Yeah, it's important.
Synergy. It's about synergy.
It's important. Faucet. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us here, Evan, and, we are so thankful to you, dear audience, for putting up with us, and, hopefully, we have brought some entertainment and laughter into your day. Thank you so much for coming in out of the storm and joining us here in the storm cave. We'll see you next time.